Hi YouTube, welcome to another edition of Horror Hands, and for this video we're going to be looking at some of the extreme horror movies in my collection. I'll mention a few of them, give you like a quick fire review, let you know the things that go on in them, and then I've devised this kind of chart here to categorize which of these extreme movies are good, bad and downright disgusting. So I'll let you know where they fall on this scale. And then stick around at the end because I've also devised this little thing here which will just let you know which of these extreme movies I think have a rewatchability factor and which ones of these I wouldn't or couldn't watch again. So this one should be an interesting one. Now, as I say, this is going to be on extreme horror films. I'm going to be going into some details that are pretty nasty, and some of these include real life violence and death of people and animals. So if you don't want to hear about that, you might want to give this video a skip. I don't want to upset anyone with this one. But if you are an aficionado of extreme horror, we'll get into this. I'll let you know what I think about a few of the ones that I've got in my collection. So first up for this video, we have a Serbian film from 2010. Now, out of all these extreme horror films, a Serbian film is the one where I'm really not comfortable getting into the plot and the things that go on in this movie. If you're into extreme horror, I'm sure you know about this one, you've probably seen it, and you can easily look up the things that go on in this one, but there's just things here that I don't want to describe and words that I don't want to use on this channel. But if you are a fan of extreme horror movies, the fact that I won't want to mention this one is a pretty good indication as to just how hardcore this one is. But a Serbian film, despite its horrifying content, which you really do have to try and work through, I do think it is a rather good film. I'm putting it on the good scale for this video. There's a few things about it that I think work well. First of all, I think the movie looks fantastic. It looks really good. It's very glossy and has some really nice cinematography, which is unusual for films within this ilk. The acting in it is fantastic. It's pretty intense. And the gore and the violence, although it's not the most goriest or violent of these kind of movies, when it goes on in this film, it really delivers and it's pretty strong in places. But this one's more kind of the theme and the things that it suggests within the film that are just like next level horrifying and really will get to a lot of viewers. But for me, I do think as a film it's good. It has some good filmmaking merit if you can look through certain things. So for me, first movie, a Serbian film, I am putting it in the good category. Next up we have Africa Addio from 1966. Gautieri Jacopetti and Franco Prosperi's horrifyingly gut-wrenching yet epic documentary of the African continent during a time of transition where the British Army were pulling out and relinquishing power and handing it back over to Africa, which sounds like a good thing, but from the look of this documentary just resulted in a whirlwind of murder, torture and animal poaching on a genocidal scale. The things that they film in this documentary are just beyond shocking and will stay with you for a long time. There's aerial shots of hundreds of men, women and children being rounded up and killed and buried in shallow graves, people being shot in the street, hands being chopped off, and some of the worst animal cruelty you'll ever see in a Mondo documentary. And that's really the kicker in this one for me. The animal poaching scenes in this are just like barbaric, and they go on forever. The majestic wildlife of Africa, the elephants, zebras, hippos, they're all mercilessly hunted, and it takes a long time to bring them down. They're not just sort of shot and dropped. They're hunted down with like spears and just implements, and oh, it's awful to watch and really heartbreaking. But despite its horrifying content, I do think this is a really well-made documentary. It has been slated by a lot of people over the years for its propagandist angle and its kind of racist connotations, but I do think it's very well made. At times it's quite beautiful. Sadly, it's still quite poignant nowadays, and it's probably one of the only visual accounts of the things that went on there in Africa during that time. I mean, the filmmakers themselves nearly get killed on a couple of occasions, but in that respect should kind of be preserved a little bit and looked at with a bit of importance, because it's the only account that we'll have, and I mean, maybe we could learn from it in some kind of way, but that's a bit of a different discussion. But yeah, you can't deny the power and sort of the shock value that this one has, and just the epic lengths that the filmmakers went to capture this crazy, horrifying stuff. So even though this is a tough watch, this is one of the hardest movies I've got in my collection. It is not one that many people will want to go for at all. I do consider it a well-made documentary and somewhat of an important documentary in many respects. So I'm putting this one in the good category as well. Next up we have August Underground from 2001. And this is one that I have been quite vocal about recently with it coming out on Blu-ray. It's not one that I'm a fan of. I think this is a pretty abhorrent little movie, to be honest. I'll start with a bit of a positive, if you can call it this, but this is probably the movie that is the closest you will ever see to a real life snuff movie, and a very violent and crazy one at that. This is just these two friends that go around capturing, torturing, humiliating and killing people while documenting it on a handheld camera. It's really unpleasant. It's not nice to watch. There's virtually no entertainment factor, and there's some really gross out stuff in this one as well. There's some rather sort of like bodily fluids and fecal matter that's thrown into the mix, which is just not for me at all. And regardless of all that as well, it's just a horrible film to watch visually. It looks awful. It's scratchy and dingy. It's even more kind of handheld than Blair Witch. That actually makes that look like a good film. It's all over the place and a real kind of onslaught on the eyes. So for me, it's just a really awful, horrible film that I don't know who would like this. I don't know who would enjoy it. I'm putting this one in the disgusting category because it really does get unpleasant. And as I say, there's a lot of kind of bodily stuff that's smeared about the place and all put on people's faces and things like that, whilst all this crazy torture stuff's going on. It's really unpleasant. Could have easily gone into the bad list, but it kind of goes beyond that, and it's just absolutely disgusting, and for me, just completely unrecommendable. Not one that I like. Next up, we have the Banned in America series from 1998. This is a 6-part shock footage series that at the time was only available on like these late night television infomercials in America. They'd come on at like 3 a.m. in the morning and would be like, call this number to get your copy of Banned in America. So very kind of underground stuff, never really commercially available in that sense. But Banned in America, all 6 of them are kind of quick fire clip shows of really shocking, nasty, real life stuff. Pretty gory as well. Anything from kind of car wrecks, firing squads, executions, accidents, violence in the street, some nasty animal cruelty thrown in there as well, freak accidents and the aftermath of kind of bombings and shootings and things like that, and it's all 100% real. So if you are someone that wants to see something really shocking and goes for these kind of shock mixtapes, Banned in America will definitely deliver, but it's a very hard watch. It's accompanied by this really weird kind of electric disco house music that really doesn't go with it that well, and it's kind of monotonely narrated by someone whose name that I forget. But yeah, it's really kind of just a nasty shock footage. But as I say, it does deliver in terms of being real and quite in your face. In terms of this one, it's difficult to categorise because it's not good, but it does deliver on what it says. But for me, it's just not a nice thing at all. It's kind of, I'm putting it in the bad section because it's not a nice thing to watch. It's not something that you can really sit down and enjoy, nor is it something that I'd recommend to people. So yeah, I don't know how I can explain this any other way than saying it's bad. It would feel weird to say this is a good thing. Kind of disgusting in places, but not enough to warrant it in the disgusting list. But yeah, I can't really get too excited about real life death and suffering. So although it does deliver For what it is, it's pretty bad and pretty nasty. Next up we have Cannibal from 2006. Boy, is this a hard going one. And this one's actually based on a true story. This is a German film about a German case where this guy was into cannibalism and wanted to eat somebody. And he put an advert out on the internet and actually got a response from somebody who wanted to be eaten. And the pair met up and made it happen. And it's the story of what went on between them in this really dingy house over the course of a few days. And this one's a really disturbing one. Not necessarily for why you might think. It does deliver on gore and some really sort of torturous moments. But it's more of a kind of a study on them and how they get on in this developing relationship between them. There's actually quite a lot of sort of tenderness between them. And they really enjoy being together and spending time together, albeit they're very disturbed people. So it makes for some really uncomfortable viewing. In terms of the cannibalism and the gore in it, that's really hard going as well. It's hard to watch. The castration scene where the guy does it with his own teeth is like next level horrible. But it's, as I say, it's really just kind of the notion of this and the feeling of being stuck in this horrible house while this kind of weird relationship's going on and this foreboding act of cannibalism is on the cards. It was really hard to get through. Now, for this one, I am putting it in the bad category. I didn't enjoy this one. It's really hard going and quite melancholic at the same time. And in addition to that, it really didn't give you all that much information. I would have liked a lot more details on this case and the two men involved, particularly the guy who wanted to be eaten. I was very interested in what his background might have been. And then at the end of it, kind of what happens and it sort of finishes, and there's no information on what happened to the cannibal guy. I assume he got caught because this is a recorded case, but I don't know if he went to prison, if he's in prison, what happened to him. So you kind of sit through all this hard-going movie to not really find out anything about the case. So yeah, it's just not one that I enjoyed at all. It's a really tough, miserable film that, yeah, it is not one that I would recommend. So I am putting this one in the bad category. Next up we have Cannibal Holocaust from 1980. Ruggero Deodato's Italian cannibal classic and one of the seminal video nasties here in the UK, and really, in my opinion, a masterclass of extreme horror filmmaking. This has a bit of everything and is executed perfectly and horrifyingly. So the famous story now of the 4 filmmakers that go into the Amazon jungle to investigate the myth of cannibalism, and these people aren't the most kind of moral of people. They're out for sort of sensationalism and to sell papers and things like that, and they're pretty horrible and nasty, but it backfires on them in a pretty horrifying way as the cannibals turn the tables and they are brutally killed in the Amazon jungle. This one's got it all. It's got the horrifying violence, the gore, it's got the real life violence with the animal cruelty in it, which is not nice at all. It's got the social commentary and kind of Ruggero Deodato, his statements on society at the time and the media and things like that. The acting in it is fantastic. For an Italian cannibal film, or an Italian horror film in general, sometimes the acting can be quite stilted, but I think it's quite genuine, and they all look like they're really scared in this movie, which just adds to it. So yeah, one of the best, I would say, in terms of Italian cannibal films and just extreme filmmaking in general. It still holds up very, very well, which is very impressive. I'm definitely putting Cannibal Holocaust in the good category. It would be higher if I had one, but yeah, I think this is a film which has a lot of merit, is very well put together, and still holds up today, which is a real something for these kind of video nasties at the time. So yeah, Cannibal Holocaust for me easily falls into the good category. Next up we have Faces of Death from 1978. Another one of the seminal video nasties here in the UK, And one of the movies that really boosted the VHS sales as well, all over the world. So got to hand it to it for that. But Faces of Death for the longest time had this really strong mythos about it as just this like pitch black horror that purported to show real life death from around the world. There were stories of people going insane from watching it and things like that, and people just watched it out of sort of curiosity and became just an insane horror phenomenon in the 70s and 80s. Nowadays, it's not the most convincing of movies, I have to say. I think the only things that kind of hold up as being real were like the slaughterhouse scenes and things like that, which is unfortunate and quite unpleasant still to this day. The rest of it now is very hokey and over the top and somewhat laughable, dare I say. But Faces of Death, to me, it's always one that I have a lot of respect for. I have a lot of affinity for it, for just what it represents, of coming out during that time and creating such a storm about what it was and the myths around it and things like that. It's really fascinating to hear about the things that it did culturally upon its release. Nowadays, I did watch it not too long ago, and it's kind of boring more than anything, I have to say. It's hard to get through just in terms of its ploddingness and any kind of sort of any of the more gory or crazy scenes you can kind of see now from a modern lens that it's all fake and prosthetics and smoke and mirrors and things like that. But it still has an entertainment factor to it. I kind of like the Dr. Gross character. It makes me laugh in a way. So I am a fan of Faces of Death. I think it's horribly out of time now, and it doesn't have the power that it used to have, unfortunately. But I like it. I'm putting it in the good category because I think it'll always have a degree of impressiveness about its presentation and what it did in the landscape of horror. So yeah, Faces of Death for me, putting that in the good category. Next up we have Martyrs from 2008, an excellent movie, but boy is this another hard going one. Full on kind of existential torture movie from France. This one sees the story of kind of this cult of people that torture people, usually young women because they're more receptive apparently, torture them to the brink of death because every now and again one of them will get a glimpse of the afterlife and in theory relay that back so this cult of people can get a definitive answer as to kind of what's there afterlife. So pretty deep stuff, pretty existential themes in this one. And of course you have the very ambiguous ending where you're not too sure what the person said. So definitely a good movie. I'm putting this in the good category. It's not one that I'll return to very often because of how hard going it is. It really is quite a disturbing and downbeat, miserable film. But I can't criticise it in terms of its filmmaking and how well it's put together, and it absolutely delivers in the horror side of things as well. So yeah, Martyrs for me, definitely a good film. Next up we have Men Behind the Sun from 1988, a movie that purports to show the horrors of a Japanese prisoner of war camp during World War II and the really sort of terrifying and horrible experiments that they put Chinese prisoners through. Kind of filmed in like a docudrama sort of way. It's not quite real, it is acted, but it's presented as if it was kind of a factual account, if you will. And we see a number of things. There's the famous scene of the woman having her hands frozen and then dipped in hot water and the flesh comes off. There's the scene with the woman in the gas chamber with the baby. I didn't particularly like that. I thought that was quite bad taste, really. And then also the scene with the rat. There is a scene that was thought to be real, but actually isn't, where the rats eat the cat. I can confirm it is fake. The cat was covered in bits of jam to make it look like blood, and the rats chomped on the jam to make it look like the cat was being eaten. So that wasn't real. So any cat lovers out there, you can rest assured they didn't kill the cat for real in Men Behind the Sun. But the rats that were flamethrowered at the end were unfortunately burnt for real. So yeah, some quite nasty things in Men Behind the Sun. It's not the most kind of fast-paced and in-your-face and entertaining of movies, I have to say, but it is quite a disquieting look at the things that kind of went on in those prisoner of war camps during that time. So yeah, if you do want a bit of sort of historical war kind of movie with a bit of extreme content, there is a few things in this to go at. I'm putting it in the bad category. It's not necessarily a bad movie. It's just not one that I get all that excited about. It's not got enough in it to kind of keep me returning to watch it again. But at the same time, it's not horrible enough where I think never again could I withstand that. This one's just a bit meh. So I can't really say it's good. It's not particularly aged all that well, I think, is part of its problem as well. So yeah, not one that I'm particularly excited about. I've got to put Men Behind the Sun in the bad category. Next up we have Mondo Kane, or Mondo Kane, however you want to say it, from 1962. So one of the first Mondo shockumentaries out there. Gualtieri, Jacopetti and Franco Prosperi again, before they hit us hard with Africa Addio. They brought us Mondo Kane, which was a film that purported to show the kind of the weird and wonderful and violent kind of traditions from around the world. It's basically kind of a weird National Geographic showcase of just strange things happening, really, and weird kind of ceremonies. There is a few kind of hard-hitting scenes. The killing of the pigs was pretty nasty. I think there's an ox that has its head chopped off. But other than that, it's kind of just weird things, I have to say. And this one hasn't aged very well at all. It really kind of sits out of place in this day and age and has some awkward narration and some real kind of out of time ideas and cultural references, shall we say. So Mondo Kane for me, I got to put this one in the bad one. It's so outdated now and so strange. It doesn't really deliver, nor does it hit that hard in terms of the shockumentary aspects. It's worth watching as a bit of a curio, a strange little documentary from a very sort of distant time, which may make you raise an eyebrow here and there. But really, there's not a lot in Mondo Kane that still packs any kind of punch. Next up we have Necromantic from 1988. Jord Buchgereit's kind of kooky movie, pretty gross out at times. The story of like this street sweeper that finds the rotting remains of a dead body on the street and takes it home to enjoy its company, shall we say, but is dismayed to find that his wife has a thing for the corpse more than him, and it all spirals into some pretty nasty, gnarly, gross out, gruesome horror. Yeah, this is another one that's pretty hard going, one that kind of lacks any real kind of levity or anything, which you think this kind of story might require a little bit. It's just kind of gross out, to be honest, and pretty hard going. Not really one for me. I'm putting this one in the bad category. This is another one of the German extreme films like Cannibal. They're just hard going and quite melancholic, if you will. And I remember not getting too much from Necromantic. It does have its fans, and I think if you do like kind of crazy out there filmmaking, there is some quite gruesome, shocking stuff that will certainly tick those boxes, but it's just not one that I got too much entertainment from or was sort of compelled to rewatch it again and again. So yeah, not one that really did a lot for me. Next up we have Regurgitated Sacrifice from 2008. From the Vomit Gore series of films, which is exactly what it says on the tin. It's as gruesome and disgusting as it sounds. Don't ask me what the plot is of this one. I have no idea. It seems to be merely the excuse for a series of vignettes where people are either gruesomely mutilated or vomit all over each other, or both. And it delights in showing this in prolonged, gleeful detail. This one is going straight into the disgusting category, and yeah, is one of the most disgusting things I've ever seen. And finally we have Salo, or the 120 Days of Sodom from 1975. Pier Paolo Pasolini's delightful descent into sexual humiliation, torture and murder as these kind of upper class high-ups round up and kidnap this bunch of really young men and women and sort of mess with them and torture them for their own amusement. It's a really nauseating affair, and one that really gets under your skin, from sort of just the visual violence in it to the dialogue, where they just gleefully come together and talk about various forms of abuse. It's a really horrible film. The eating scene, shall we say, is one of the hardest things I've ever seen in a movie. I think there's a good movie in here somewhere. Pier Paolo Pasolini was a very accomplished filmmaker, but you've really got to delve through the levels of real kind of sordid nastiness to get to that in this movie. This one goes straight into the disgusting column. It's a really tough watch, and was one of the movies that nearly made me lose my lunch, I have to say. So yeah, Salo definitely earns its right in the disgusting camp. So there we go, guys. That's a few of the extreme horrors that I have in my collection, and where I categorise them in terms of good films, bad films, and downright disgusting films. Let me know what you think about this. I'd be interested to know if you agree or disagree, if you think I've been fair or not with these movies. And stay tuned, because I'm going to now go into whether I think these movies are sort of rewatchable or not. So we'll get into that next. Okay guys, so this is what I've put together here. Got two columns here, a list for movies that I would watch again, and then a list for the ones that I wouldn't or couldn't put myself through a second time. So I'll just go down them. I'll start with the ones that I would watch again, and then go for the ones that were just a bit too much. So first of all, call me a sicko, but I would watch a Serbian film again. Like I say, as a movie, I think it was pretty well made. It looked pretty good, and it had some filmmaking merit. It doesn't really have some of like the horrible claustrophobic feel that things like maybe Cannibal and Salo have. It does kind of move around in terms of its plot, so there's a little bit of respite there. But yeah, despite its horrifying content, I could watch it again and just sort of enjoy, if you will, the more sort of modern look and the filmmaking of this one. Cannibal Holocaust. This one might be actually the most watched film of all these on my list. I have watched this one multiple times and appreciate it for what it is. Find a lot of merit. Usually find different levels of subtext in the movie when I watch it repeatedly. So that is one that I can return to and enjoy it for what it is. Faces of Death, same again. It's not one I watch a whole lot, but I will sometimes return to it just for a reminder of its kind of the goofiness and some of the things that it did quite well. So yeah, that is one that I have watched multiple times. Men Behind the Sun, I'd watch it again. I haven't seen it for a long time, so I would watch it again just to see if I got any more from it, or sort of just to remind myself of it. Like I say, it wasn't such an endurance test that I couldn't return to it. So yeah, I would watch that one again. And Necromantic, same thing. Although I didn't massively enjoy it, there's not really anything in this one to make me think, oh gosh, never again. I couldn't put myself through that. So that's those ones. These ones, I'm not so sure I could bring myself to watch these ones again. So, Africa Addio, yeah, this one is just... First of all, it's a very long film, so it's a real endurance test, because there's a lot of nasty things that go on in this one from like over the course of about 2 hours and 40 minutes. So you really go through this one. Sounds pretty awful, but I could probably watch the human aspects of this one again. But there's various animal cruelty scenes in this that I never want to see again. So this one is a no from me. August Underground, it's just a no. I just don't like the film. It's horrible to look at. I have no reason to watch that one ever again. Banned in America, like I say, completely delivers on what it sets out to do. It's a very effective shock mixtape, but I just don't see any kind of reason why you'd want to rewatch this one multiple times. I wouldn't like the idea of that. It's not one you can sort of sit down and put on with a cup of tea. So yeah, it's a no really. I've seen it, I know what goes on. I don't need to watch it over and over again. Cannibal, yeah, I'd be very reluctant to go back to this one. As I say, it's just a miserable film experience, and I didn't like it. It's just one that I would knowingly not enjoy. Martyrs, again, excellent movie, but I'm in no kind of mood to return to it. It was really hard going, very depressing, and maybe I'll return to it in the future, but right now I don't want to go there again just yet. But in this example, that's a sign of a really good extreme horror film. For me to think, no, I'm not ready for that again. That's kind of like, you know, well done guys. That's a pretty serious horror film right there. Mondo Kane, this one, there's just kind of no reason for me to return to it. Like I say, it's so outdated. I just don't know why I'd want or need to return to this one. Regurgitated Sacrifice, oh my goodness. I mean, probably don't need to explain why I don't want to rewatch people vomiting all over each other. That one's an absolute no. And then Salo, I mean, I'd really have to bring myself to watch that one again. I mean, like if a company approached me and said, we'll pay you all this money to review Salo, I may bring myself to do it, but that would be a tough watch, and I just don't want to sit through that one again anytime soon. So that is my list for both of these. Those are the ones that I could watch again and get some kind of appreciation from. But the ones there, dear Lord, no, I am not ready for and do not want to revisit any of those movies right there. So there we go guys, that was a little bit of a video covering some of the extreme horror movies in my collection. Hopefully you enjoyed that. Let me know what you think of any of these movies, if you've seen them, and if you liked them or found them traumatizing yourself, let me know. So thank you very much for watching, and stay tuned for more videos.